on Nebraska Nightly, a special edition show that recognizes April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
We'll hear from advocates, survivors, and officials about what measures are being taken.
Tonight, we will have a look at statistics not only here in Nebraska, but across the U.S.
How organizations on UNL's campus and UNLPD are implementing new systems to keep students safe.
And learn about how the National Sexual Violence Resource Center recognizes April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Live from the Don and Lorena Meyer studio at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln College of Journalism and Mass Communications, this is Nebraska Nightly.
Welcome to this Thursday's special edition of Nebraska Nightly. I'm Macy Newmeister.
And I'm Haley Haar. Thank you for joining us.
Sexual Assault Awareness Month was first observed nationally in April of 2001.
Yet in the United States, movements for social change and equality date back to the 1940s and 50s.
Our show today is focused around sexual assault awareness and the many resources and advocates available right here in the state of Nebraska.
Sexual assault is a serious issue. Please be aware that the following content could be triggering or distressing. Viewer discretion is advised. To understand the stories we are featuring today, let's get a glimpse at the larger issue at hand. Here is a look at the statistics, not only right here in Nebraska, but across the U.S. RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, has helped 3.7 million survivors and their loved ones in the past 27 years. It defines sexual assault as sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit consent of the victim. Every 68 seconds, another American is sexually assaulted. Only 37% of these will be reported to the police. In Nebraska, it's estimated that only 13% of rape victims report their crime. It's been 17 years since activist Tarana Burke started the Me Too movement to increase awareness about sexual harassment and sexual assault. In 2017, it gained its first widespread attention with public allegations against former film producer Harvey Weinstein, and web searches for sexual harassment grew by 110%. Among nationwide undergraduate students, 26.4% of females and 6.8% of males experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation. Hundreds of students protested on the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's campus during the first week of fall 2021 classes, when reports surfaced of a sexual assault that allegedly occurred at the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity house. A Change.org petition created by a UNL student titled Ban Fiji Forever circulated nationwide and collected over 500,000 signatures. Although the Nebraska Commission of Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice reported a 53% decrease in statewide sex offenses in 2021, the state's collegiate demographic made some prominent headlines. This is a prominent problem affecting young adults. We'll hear more about local resources later in the show.
Students staying safe on campus is University of Nebraska-Lincoln Police Department's Captain of Administrative Services, Aaron Pembleton's top priority. Representatives from the University Police Department have set strategies supporting the safety and security for students and staff on campus. One of those strategies is all about sticking together.
The biggest thing is just have some personal safety awareness. You know, like if you're going out, the buddy system's always great that you can use to just have a friend that's looking out for you. Know your limits when especially on campus. A lot of the stuff that we see can be alcohol facilitated, right?
UNLPD does ask that if you are not feeling safe walking home one evening, to call them at 402-472-2222, and they will provide a walking escort. Safe walks are conducted by a UNLPD community service officer or a police officer, and they ask if there is an emergency to please dial 911.
The National Sexual Violence Resource Center provides research tools to advocates working to end sexual harassment, assault, and abuse, with the understanding that sexual violence also means ending racism, sexism, and all forms of oppression. With April being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, they set the theme. We spoke with Hallie Nelson on why this year's theme is Drawing Connections, Prevention Demands Equity.
For this year, we have our theme, Drawing Connections, Prevention Demands Equity. And this is drawing on a conversation. As with every SAM theme, these are conversations that should be had the entire year for multiple years, not just within that specific month of April. But a cultural understanding that has been happening as of late is a lot surrounding intersectionality, is surrounding how people's different identities impact their life experiences, be they race or disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, or otherwise. And so when we look at all these things, we should also look at how do the forms of oppression that impact those minority groups also contribute to rates of sexual violence against those groups, and what can be done to mitigate that.
To increase awareness around this year's theme and its social media challenges, visit www.nsvrc.org.
Coming up after the break, we hear voices from the University of Nebraska Omaha and Chadron.
And a professional look into the Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education at UNL.
Plus, a look into how DNA testing is helping solve a decade-old sexual assault case. All up after the break. Audio. Okay.
Need for blood never stops. And at the Nebraska Community Blood Bank, your blood could help save lives. Right now, only 7% of the population donates blood. But imagine if there were more.
We're sitting at below a 7-day level of supply of all blood types across the board. So every blood type is important, and we need all donors of all types to come in and donate right now.
At the Nebraska Community Blood Bank, they believe that all types make a strong blood supply.
Welcome back. Campus safety is something colleges across Nebraska and the country are constantly reviewing.
That's correct, Haley, and many campuses right here in Nebraska have advocated for an increased safety standards.
For students on campus, sexual assault awareness resources are essential to keep students safe. Knowing what things to look for on many different campuses can save lives. Nebraska Nightly's Colin Lopes spoke with some students from across these University of Nebraska, Omaha, and Chadron's campuses to talk about preventative measures that are in place for the students and the community.
Sexual assault is a serious issue that happens everywhere. It affects students on college campuses and those close in our communities, leaving sadness and vulnerability in its wake. I spoke with Cameron Kozacek from Chadron University and Robert Bardura from the University of Omaha to hear about sexual assault on their campus and see how it compares to UNL.
I will say, sexual assault does happen here in Chadron, just the same as any other college campus. We have mandatory reporters on campus. They would put in a report through our system that would get sent to Title IX.
The Women and Gender Equity Center, you can come in a safe space and peer-to-peer report. The Gender and Sexuality Resource Center has online reporting, and then through Title IX, you can anonymously report. They promote sexual assault awareness. There's resources for the victims and survivor advocates.
With sexual assault occurring everywhere, it is critical to do what we can to put a stop to it. That is no different for Chadron or Omaha in the events they host to spread awareness.
I know we're going to be hosting a Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event. And basically what it is it's an international collective fighting against gender violence and sexual assault against women, where men put on heels and attempt to walk a mile through town, inviting sports teams and stuff like that to put on heels and take a pledge and kind of make a public stand against it.
We do an annual Take Back the Night, the WGC and GSRC host this event. We kind of start off in our pet bowl, which is like a big green space on our campus with chants and speakers to kind of talk about sexual health resources. Then we'll kind of lead a group of protesters, our students, through our campus and then to there's like a memorial park across the street that kind of holds space for a lot of protests. We'll also have more speakers around the community, student speakers that want to share their stories.
While sexual assault may be hard to spot and stop, we owe it to those around us to be vigilant and conscious of our surroundings. Stay aware to put a stop to sexual assault here and everywhere else.
While April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, the fight to stop sexual assault never ends. It is important to do what we can to put a stop to sexual assault, and everyone can play a part. Reach out to your resource center on your campus to learn more on how to get involved.
CARE at UNL has been providing advocacy and support for students, faculty, and staff who have been experiencing sexual assault, domestic or dating violence, sexual harassment, and stalking. Advocates at CARE work to create a safe and confidential space for anyone to come and tell their story. We spoke with CARE Director and Advocate Melissa Wilkerson.
So CARE stands for the Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education. And we really have kind of two main goals, if you will, missions. Part of that mission, and a really important part, is serving people who've been impacted by power-based violence, such as relationship or sexual violence. We're a confidential resource here on campus, and so we can provide support anonymously, if you will, confidentially, so that if someone wants to come in and process what's happened, try to understand what their options are for reporting, options are for resources, we can help with that.
Learn more about CARE and its resources, visit care.unl.edu. Over the last 20 years, DNA testing of rape kits along with these established of National DNA Database have become a tool for solving sexual assault cases. Nearly 30 years after the teen's rape and death, a man was charged in 2019 for her murder, all because of DNA. CNN's Natalie Swaby reports.
On the stand, a mom details the moment she learned what happened to her 16-year-old daughter, Sarah Yarborough.
When we got there, that was when they told us that her body had been found.
Laura Yarborough says it happened on a weekend when Sarah had stayed behind while the family traveled out of town for a soccer tournament. She was discovered on December 14th, 1991.
Sarah Yarborough fought for her life that morning, where she was sexually assaulted, where she was strangled, and where she was killed.
Prosecuting attorney Celia Lee says the man who killed her is Patrick Nicholas.
Patrick Nicholas doesn't and has never matched the description.
That argument from defense attorney David Montez. Prosecutors say nearly 32 years ago, Sarah, a member of the drill team, drove to her high school campus in Federal Way for a Saturday morning invitational. She arrived early.
After leaving the safety of her car, Sarah was encountered by her assailant.
Lee says that man forced Sarah into a nearby embankment. Shortly after, two boys, ages 12 and 13, were cutting through campus.
All of a sudden, they saw a man pop up out of the embankment, the bushes.
The boys said the man walked away, and as they moved closer, they saw Sarah's body. What followed was a large-scale police investigation, thousands of tips, but no arrest until investigators turned to a forensic genetic genealogist and used direct-to-consumer DNA test data to generate investigative leads. Nicholas was identified and followed by investigators who were there when he discarded a cigarette.
That discarded cigarette from Mr. Nicholas was a match.
It was absolutely the first case ever used genetic genealogy.
In 2019, Nicholas was arrested. Today, his defense attorney says the police investigation had lots of false leads.
They used technology that is not only unproven, but just wacky, really.
Montez says his client is innocent.
He's not the person that killed Sarah.
Many other cases have been opened many years later due to DNA technology, just like Sarah's.
Coming up after the break, hear from the Nebraska Coalition and how they are working to end sexual and domestic violence in the Cornhusker State.
Plus, a personal interview from Beth Ravello, a sexual assault survivor and fourth grade teacher. That and more after the break.
Of the 40 million tons of plastic waste generated in the U.S. in 2021, only 5%, or 2 million tons, was recycled. Make sure you do your part in keeping Anderson Hall clean. For more information on recycling statistics, visit epa.gov today.
Don't let it happen to other Big Ten schools. Go to saveourdinos.org to learn more.
Welcome back. Emma Thurston had the chance to meet with advocates from the Nebraska Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence and learn more about their programs and how they help victims across the state.
The Nebraska Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence is a nonprofit based in Lincoln that works with programs across the state to provide services to sexual and domestic violence survivors and to create a coordinated and comprehensive response and prevention program.
The foundation of the services we provide are total confidentiality and also no judgment. So survivors and friends and families who are trying to support survivors can come to one of the local programs. You can find the list on our website. You actually can visit a program and tell them what you're looking for.
These statewide programs provide a variety of services for survivors.
They can do a number of different things around like transportation, going to the hospitals, and being with you while you're getting a certain exam.
Across the state, there is a need for services like these, as Nebraska has a staggering number of survivors of sexual and domestic violence.
When we look to the metro areas, we know that they're overloaded with the amount of survivors that they serve, with the involvement that they have in the community and educating. And then as we move out to rural Nebraska, right, which is the majority of our land, looking at how we can expand resources, how we can obtain funding to support their programs.
The coalition recently published a statewide prevalence study looking into rates of sexual violence across Nebraska.
This is going on in all communities across Nebraska. So if you're looking at rate, it's not necessarily higher just in like the Lincoln or the Omaha metro areas. Some of the higher rates were happening like out west even.
Sexual violence is a prevailing issue across the state, and coalition members say there are societal beliefs that contribute to this issue.
I hope any sexual assault awareness campaigns can be directed at how men can not be perpetrators and less on how women can avoid being assaulted.
There are a number of factors that contribute to the perpetuation of sexual violence across the nation, but coalition members believe this can be combated with increased education on the topic.
We see this more recently, especially with the current political environment, but also the last year or two when they were trying to pass health standards for public schools across Nebraska. There was a real pushback for talking about uncomfortable topics.
What can we do as peers to support survivors of sexual violence?
I think a lot of times responsibility gets put on survivors to share their story, share how the experience affected them so that they can educate. And I really think we need to call on empathy in that I believe the survivor, I don't share their experiences, but I advocate for safety.
Sexual assault is a traumatic experience that can leave deep and emotional scars on survivors. Sharing one's experience with others can be an incredibly challenging and daunting task, particularly for survivors of sexual assault. There are many reasons why survivors may find it difficult to speak about their experiences, but for some to heal, they find peace in telling their story.
Beth Ravello is a 4th grade teacher at Omaha Public Schools. She spends her days helping kids learn and grow, but today she shares her story of overcoming sexual assault and sexual abuse she faced in college.
She now speaks and shares her story as a part of the Speakers Bureau at RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network.
My story unfortunately started around 2016, 2017. I had started college at UNK in Kearney I was in the Army, Nebraska Army National Guard, and I had missed that fall semester due to training in there. So I started college at UNK that spring 2016 semester. And unfortunately, when you start college a semester late, you don't have nearly as much support. And unfortunately, I knew a soldier in that area from a different unit that I had previously been friends with, and we hung out a lot. And unfortunately, he took my trust for granted, and he took the fact that I didn't have a support system for granted. Because I didn't have any new friends at college to rely on or talk to, I didn't feel like I could open up or talk to anybody about my assault. So what happened was that it was late March 2016, and he had assaulted me in his dorm room when he asked me to come over and come hang out and do homework, and I was completely fine with that. Unfortunately for me, he had ulterior motives. And I didn't know what to do. I was very confused. I was like, how could somebody who I trusted and was my friend do this to me? And I didn't know how to feel about it. And I was in denial for a while. And unfortunately, I was not the first woman he had done this to. Unfortunately, 2 days before he had assaulted me, he had also assaulted my coworker. And shortly after he had assaulted me, he was arrested and charged with sexual assault. And as the investigative process went on, we found out that the two of us were not the only women he had assaulted, and that this was a continuing pattern. By the time he took his plea bargain, 3 women had come forward. By the time of his sentencing, 4 women had come forward. And that's just the women who came forward. That's not including the women who did not come forward. I think about those women. It's like who didn't feel it like they could come forward. But it's still a great number for 4 women to come forward by the time of his sentencing. And he was sentenced to the Nebraska State Penitentiary for 4 to 8 years. He was released a little bit after 2 years. And I believe it was spring 2019, I found out that he was eligible for parole. And I went down to the state penitentiary and I gave my testimony to a room of 30 separate people in that eligible for parole room. I got to work with um, the victim protection teams. And that was an experience because even though your assailant is not allowed to look at you, there's no rules against their family giving you dirty looks or saying anything to you. And unfortunately, since I had such a long drive from Kearney to Lincoln, I didn't get to have that talk about a safe word yet. And unfortunately, as soon as we stepped into the state pen, and I looked down at the stairs, that was his entire family at the bottom of the stairs, just staring at me. And we had to walk right past them, and um, we went ahead and locked up all of our things in those little lockers they have. And when I went to go give my testimony, his entire family was there. Toddlers were there, babies were there, and the entire parole board, except for one. There are usually 5. One was gone that day, so there were only 4. And my testimony was strong enough that 2 out of the 4 voted to not give him parole. And since it was a tiebreaker and the 5th one wasn't there, they decided to hold his parole hearing back 1 month. And what the victim protection team told me was that my testimony had been strong enough to come to that tiebreaker because that never happens. Because they are very willing, as the process should be, to rehabilitate people into regular day-to-day life. But it was very hard for me to come to terms with that. But fortunately that day, my assailant at that day, he did apologize to me finally in that meeting. And it felt like a weight off my shoulders There are so many survivors out there who never get that apology, who never get that. And for whatever reason, I got that apology finally, and it felt like a weight was taken off my shoulders and that I wasn't crazy. And I, it was a weight lifted. I was free. And uh, he has now been released since. He has served his time, and he is now free in Nebraska day to day. He is on the sex offenders list, but there is that little piece of me. But I am glad I finally got that apology.
We would like to thank Beth for sharing a very personal and vulnerable story.
And to hear more of survivor stories, go to RAIN's website at www.rainn.org. Coming up after the break, sexual assault awareness-based events taking place right here in Lincoln.
That's right, Macy, from bowling to trivia.
And all about denim to art exhibits, all after the break.
Before we end our show today, we wanted to share with you some upcoming events supporting Sexual Assault Awareness Month that you can get involved in.
Yes, and there are many things happening right here in Lincoln to help continue the conversation.
Aaron Mitleiter has the latest. Aaron?
Thank you, Macy and Haley. Are you an avid bowler? Voices of Hope, who provides 24/7 crisis intervention services to people who are victims of sexual assault and domestic violence, will host the annual Bowl-a-thon on April 29th at Sun Valley Lanes. The Strikeout Sexual Assault event welcomes anyone to bowl for a good cause. Contact the email marla@voicesofhopelincoln.org to RSVP the event. April 29th is National Denim Day in light of Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Sift through your closet and find your favorite jean jacket, your go-to pair of jeans, and support the cause. CARE at UNL invites everyone who participates by wearing denim to post a photo on social media using the hashtag UNLSAAM or tag @care_at_UNL. The Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education events at UNL is also hosting a What Were You Wearing? Survivor art installation from April 18th to April 20th from 7 to 11 at the Willa Cather Dining Complex. Art displays include a collection of outfits worn during assaults with accompanying stories from sexual assault survivors. The exhibit is free and open to the public. Tomorrow at the Lead Center, the Sex, Power, and Assault on Campus, a conversation for cultural change, will be happening at 7 p.m. featuring Jennifer S. Hirsch, professor at Columbia University, and Seamus Khan, professor at Princeton University, authors of Sexual Citizens, Sex, Power, and Assault on Campus. This event will share research to spark a conversation around what can be done to prevent sexual violence on campus. On April 27th, take a look at TV, movies, music, and news related to sexual violence in the media. Participate in this pop culture trivia night at 7 p.m. at the Nebraska Union Ballroom with chances of winning prizes, having snacks, and taking pictures in the photo booth. Back to you, Macy and Haley.
Thank you, Aaron. All these events and conversations that are taking place.
And voices pushing for a change. We would like to thank you for joining us for this special edition of Nebraska Nightly.
And thank you for allowing us to open up the conversation on sexual assault awareness and prevention.
Please join us tomorrow for our standard programming of Nebraska Nightly at 4 p.m.
See you tomorrow.